Yo, what's up guys? Bill here, Classic Rock and Metal Review. Time to finally get around to a review for Kiss's bootleg title, Rockford 1982 Soundboard. Another Creatures of the Night show. I've already done a review for Sioux City, which is actually just one night earlier. But these are two different animals as far as the listening experience for you. So, of course, we're going to get through the whole set list and discuss all that, why and what I'm talking about. Now, I know, man, it's been a long time coming, and not a lot of videos coming out of me. I got to admit, man, I am just been a lazy damn bum. Summer's here, and I'm just taking it easy. When I'm not working, trying to chill out. Today, taking yet another shore break from my favorite brewery, Slack Tide Brewing. These guys make great summertime stuff, especially, but really, a lot of their beers that I've had are really good. So let's check this one out. It's a Saison, whatever the hell that is. Yet another delicious beer. This is my first time trying this one. 6.3% alcohol, right in my wheelhouse these days. I think I'll be taking a shore break actually right after this filming. All right, so enough of that bullshit. Let's get to Kiss Rockford 1982. As usual, I'll set you up with what's going on with the band. You know the gist of it, but we'll just rehash it a little bit. Also get you familiar with the venue. I like to do that, man. Try to picture yourself here, you know, as much as possible. I mean, I'm doing it for me and you guys. All that good stuff, all right? We'll talk about the era in general, like I said. So, 2 silver press CDs, what you're getting from the Zodiac label. Once again, Zodiac effing rules. They're your go-to hard rock and metal label. They try to do as many soundboards as possible. This one, stereo soundboard recording. If it doesn't say stereo, it might just be a mono soundboard. So, stereo soundboard on this one. And as you probably know, there were 5 different soundboard titles released on Zodiac back in 2022. No doubt leaked from the Creatures of the Night 40th Anniversary Edition, Super Deluxe Edition that came out later in the year. Now, some of these bootleg concerts were coming out prior to the box set. Now, this is a box that I couldn't bring myself to buy. You know, there's only 5 CDs in there in the first place, right? I guess a remix or remaster of the actual album, which I already own. Okay, so discs 2 and 3. Rarities, I think the Kiss Killers is on here. I did spend $40, someone on eBay, you know, tearing that box apart, selling it piece by piece. So I snagged for $40 discs 2 and 3. Demos, rarities, and outtakes, which is a nice, fun listen. And you know what? I think I've only listened to this thing once, both discs, once each. You only really get into the songs that made Creatures on the disc, well, they call it disc 3, but the second disc of this package, okay? Discs 4 and 5 in that box were various songs from the 5 bootlegs, basically, that came out. So I kind of made a conscious decision at the time, rather get the full show. So I already had Sioux City. If you didn't catch that review, I recommend maybe you go back and watch that right now before you watch this one. Sioux City 1982 Soundboard. This one, December 30th. The night before our Rockford 1982 show, so New Year's Eve 82, all right? Also, in regards to that 40th anniversary of Creatures, came with tons of swag. I don't have much space to hang that stuff up. Yeah, I wish I could have it, but not really. I don't need it, you know, so I don't need all that swag. It's fun to look at once, then it goes in a box up on a shelf. Takes me years probably to get back to looking at that stuff. So just settled for getting these bootlegs. All right, so Rockford, my second, obviously, Creatures of the Night show. That Sioux City show was my first listen to a Creatures of the Night concert. Other than watching a few songs, someone's got some bootleg video up on YouTube from that Creatures tour. That was years ago, actually, but I only watched 3 or 4 songs. And yeah, we get that little portion of, I think it's Brazil, on the Kissology. They were my only 2 real experiences with listening to Kiss live until I got Sioux City, which I loved. It was one of my favorite bootlegs of the year for 2022. So then I swung back Got Fort Worth 77, really good show. Sound's not the best. Auckland 1980, that's back there on the shelf. Really good show. No Peter Criss, but still got Ace in there. Knoxville 79, I think is the one I got from the Dynasty tour. And kind of by that point, after getting those three, kind of jonesing for more Creatures, you know. So finally getting this Rockford a couple months back. Now, of course, as far as the band goes, after garnering that sort of disco sellout rap from 1979's Dynasty album, unfairly in my opinion, but nevertheless, that's what was going on. I Was Made for Loving You, of course, the biggest song from the album, and, you know, all of a sudden they're on pop radio, you know. So I could see where that was coming from. You know, you got to remember at this point the band's been super popular for years now anyway. Probably some decline inevitable anyway. Then losing more hardcore fan support with the decidedly cleaner and poppier Unmasked in 1980. I still don't own that album. I've heard it though. I think it's decent, but it does sound cleaner and a little more commercial friendly, let's say. Then 1981's The Elder, somewhat progressive and theme sort of album, if you want to call it that way. It's supposed to be the soundtrack for a movie that never got made. But man, this is a damn good record. I like this one a lot, as most of you do. But still kind of losing hardcore fans. That's the point here. So they beefed things up with decidedly more rock, and heavier, I should say, harder rock, Creatures of the Night in 1982. Solid album by pretty much every Kiss fan's estimation, best I can tell, including my own. I really like it, and you know, damn good one, solid one. Gave it a good listen actually a few days ago. Probably just a handful of great songs, but nothing that's not at least good. So it is solid all the way through. I go with I Love It Loud, and the title track is my favorites off of there. So their first U.S. tour in 3 years now to support this one. The declining attendance, we'll talk about that issue going on this tour. But musically, at least, they're back on their feet with a solid hard rock album and a set list with a lot of Creatures of the Night in it, at least at the beginning, which is why I've chosen these early tour shows to go with out of the 5 booths that are out there. So the tour would begin with 6 songs from Creatures in it in Bismarck, North Dakota, December 29th of 82. No bootleg for that one, as far as I know, unless there's an audience, but I didn't see a Zodiac title for that guy. Same 6 songs for Sioux City the next night, December 30th, which is why I chose that as the first show that I got a few years back now, a year and a half ago, whenever that was. And as few as only 3 songs from Creatures later in the tour. But Rockford, Illinois, we still have 5 of the 6 songs, so that's why this is number 6, or number 2 for me, going with that guy. So let's set up the show. Friday, it's a Friday night and a New Year's Eve, December 31st of 82. We're at the Metro Center, now known as the BMO Center, Rockford, Illinois. The venue that only opened the year earlier, I think early part of 81. Kind of the biggest show that was ever there would have been the Stones tour. They stopped there in 1981. Current capacity for this place listed around 6,200 for hockey, closer to 8,000 for basketball, but somewhere in the vicinity of 9,200, 9,300 for concerts. And really there's not much you can do with the size of this place. It's the way it's constructed. It's on a small sort of city block. It's probably never going to get expanded really much. The band called Sioux opened up. Apparently only 3,500 people out of the possible 9,200 attended the show per a Kiss website, which sounds about in line with what I've heard about this tour. Probably explains why fewer Creatures of the Night songs were played as the tour went on. Uriah Heep, originally announced as the second band in the middle, in between Sioux and Kiss, they ended up canceling that show. So just the 2 bands for this one. So Kiss Rockford 1982 Soundboard. It's on Zodiac label, as I mentioned. It is title number 530. This is the second press. It's the same artwork as the first press. Sometimes that can change between different pressings. Not in this case. So it's Paul Stanley, Gene Simmons, Eric Carr on drums, new guitarist Vinnie Vincent, Vinny was never officially made a member, as I mentioned on that Sioux City review. Played on Creatures of the Night, one of multiple guitars to play on there. Did this tour, obviously, the whole tour. Played on the Lick It Up album and Lick It Up tour, but never during any of that time officially made a member of the band. So you might be asking yourself, why review a concert that's only one night after one I already reviewed? Well, as most of you guys probably already realize, every show is really its own animal, and that's the case here. Now, of course, I'll be reviewing Rockford as its own separate entity, but being back-to-back nights with Sioux City, a little bit of comparison is kind of inevitable. So, all right, so let's get going with this set list here. Disc 1 starts with intro. That's track 1. That they are your turbine and tank sound effects. Tank treads turning, turbine starts it out. Louder and clearer than the Sioux City recording. They sound right up there, right up front, and man, just sound great. Familiar, hottest band in the world intro, Kiss, classic, starts things out. We blast into Creatures of the Night, the title track, which started these 10th anniversary shows. Takes about 30 or 45 seconds for the band themselves to sort of tighten up. Things are a little loosey-goosey at first. The sound can be I think, a little shrill, a little sort of metallic sounding. I normally keep the bass on my stereo around 7.5, with the super bass on, with the bass boost on. Normally my treble's up around 8.5, kind of compensate for that loud bass that I like to hear. I had to turn the treble down to 7, and that just did the trick. So you're going to probably want to turn your treble down a little bit just to normalize the sound on this recording. Vinny's solo here on Creatures, it's a little fumbly overall, especially in the beginning, but pretty damn good. Such a different take on the solos, Of course, this is a Creature song, so this was his solo all along. Strutter is next. The sound totally stabilized by the time we get to Strutter. So just the first half of Creatures, the sound's a little off. The band's a little off too. So the band and the listener need a little adjusting time during the first part of Creatures of the Night. Strutter, like I said, sound normalized, all right? And it's a thick, heavy sound. The guitars on this tour were a little more distorted than anything from the Ace era, but this and the next six songs, man, just absolutely destroy. The usual high energy killer live Kiss, but, and this is a huge but, this ferocious in-your-face mix that is simply hard rock at its live best just kicks ass. They just sound great, and the sound of this CD is great. It's kind of aggressive and right in your face, man. It's as heavy as you're ever going to hear Kiss from this era is this first part of disc 1. The solo by Vinny on this one, like I said, on Sioux City, that was my first listen to a Creatures tour show. Missing Ace's solos that first listen to Sioux City. And, by the second and third listen, that kind of wears off and you're okay. So at this point now, listen to Sioux City 4 or 5 times, this a couple times. I'm not even thinking about Ace anymore when it comes to solos on the classic songs. Vinny puts his own stamp on them, and it's interesting, good one. Some blazing fast leads in places, So kind of embracing that difference at this point. So Strutter's awesome. So is track number 4 on this one, when you include the intro as track 1. Track 4 is Calling Dr. Love. Another great heavy version. Gene is aggressive as ever. It's heavy, it's tight. Like I said, it's an in-your-face affair, this mix so far from the Soundboard. Since midway through Creatures of the Night, you can basically say that this band is totally on fire. This recording's awesome. Firehouse, ditto, all right? More of the same. It's hot, heavy, tight, simply Kiss killers, all right? It's the best way to describe it. At this point, first listen to this. By this point, I'm already thinking this is one of the best shows I've ever heard. I mean, it's that good. It's just awesome. The sound, when I talk about the mix being in your face and aggressive, it sounds like the record level is pushing the limits of normal, So it's not distorted. It's approaching distorted. not clipping, I think is what they call it when you push over the limit there. It's not doing that, but it's on the verge of it, you know. So the guitars are also at the forefront of this mix. Their sound levels are pretty equal with drums and bass, but the guitars are probably a little bit louder, which is kind of what you want, I think, you know, with most concerts anyway, hard rock and metal concerts, kind of what you like. So the mix is just great. Firehouse, though, would be the first of Vinny's, what I call dying elephant sounds at the outset of many of the solos, but it starts here with this one. 10 or 15 seconds, just this crazy dying mammal sound on the guitar. And then it just winds up after 10 or 15 seconds and goes into an awesome, great killer solo. But, you know, overall the show is so good you kind of overlook that 10 seconds of whatever the hell noise he's trying to make there. Next in the I Love It Loud, 6th song in. This will be my favorite off Creatures, and it's another great one, great performance. Sounds like the band is still doing, everyone's still doing the chorus part, which they soon dropped. Gene would be doing that by himself. Somewhere early in this tour it would be dropped, and it sounds like it's still going on here. I noticed they try for some audience participation with this again, and you know, I wasn't sure if it just wasn't the audience mic'd up well enough. You hear them, it's not great, like fair participation. Of course, it's a kind of a newer song too, that's probably part of it. But finding out that audience size was 3,500 or so kind of explains that. But at least they still do it, even with the smaller crowd. So that's cool. I Love It Loud sounds great. Cold Gin, another fantastic, awesome live Kiss performance yet again. Now, I would say my favorite concert by Kiss on audio is Tulsa 75 going into this show. So far up to this point, this show is right there. I mean, it might be as good, it might be better. This show's kicking ass so far. And Cold Gin, another awesome one. I mean, it just doesn't get any better, really. Next up, we get another one from Creatures of the Night, War Machine. I know this has been in and out of the set through the years. Another killer performance, man. I don't know what else to say. The sound quality is awesome. Like I said, aggressive is the word that comes to mind, with that record level nearing peak. What a great performer Gene is. And I think we should stop for a minute and give him his due. Like, this guy's consistently great. A handful of shows where the band's not awesome, he seems to always be pretty damn awesome, really. And I've seen and heard a lot of Kiss shows between my 3 Kissologies, 10 bootlegs, live albums and stuff. So let's throw a little nod to Gene here. Hats off to the Demon in that regard. Say what you want about some of his comments the last few years. As a performer back in the day, this dude always brought it. Really, probably the most consistent member of Kiss of all time, really. This show, by the way, I'm going to give this thing like a 10 out of 10 right now. At the very least, it's a 9 or a 9.5, but personally, I'm giving it a 10. It's just awesome. I Want You, 9th song on disc 1. You only get the full band for the front portion of this song. It segues into the turbine sound effect and then Vinnie Vincent's solo spot, where he's the only one on stage soloing, which again alternates between these cool lead work and more of those dying mammal wails, which I didn't recall that during the Sioux City show. These sort of moaning, straining noises he's making. Sound issues also going on at this point though a little bit. Page-esque performance again. Sounds like Page with the bow. You know how Vinny does that solo. Does that routine, which goes into another blistering display that blows your mind. The band comes back on, but it sounds like they might be still having some sound issues because you can only really hear the bass and drums at first and Vinny soloing. All right? You can't hear Paul's rhythm guitar. So I Want You with the guitar solo and the change in the overall sound quality kind of slow the proceedings down. Up until this point, it's been a runaway train of awesomeness, but it does sort of change gears right here during this song. You know, guitar solos always kind of break the flow most of the time for me. I like them, and then in terms of what they can do to an overall listening to a show, you know, I'm sure being there was amazing. Listening back all these years later kind of slows the flow of an unstoppable show in a way. Now, next up, Rock and Roll Hell, last song on disc 1. Third and final time that this song was played on that tour, all right? Third show of the tour, third time it's played. It wasn't played after this one, this Rockford show. So just like the end of I Want You, the sound here is less heavy. The overall performance really good. Gene is on again. All 3 songs that he sang so far sound great. But what happens here is the overall sound kind of gets normalized, all right? That pushing the limits of the record level, it sounds like that got backed off. Things, like I say, sort of normalized. And the guitars kind of fade a little bit more into the background. Although it's not really super apparent on this one. Got those segments there where it's just really bass and drums driving a lot of the song. Now, they wouldn't play this song again until 2016 on Kiss Cruise. But here you get the third and final, Rock and Roll Hell. And it's really good, just with a little more normalized sound. And that's how disc 1 ends. On to disc 2, Shout It Out Loud to start things out. Just like Rock and Roll Hell, it's really good. Both of these songs, actually, I'm liking more than ever. Shout It Out Loud I never used to really love. I'm starting to get really into it. But at this point, it's kind of confirmed that the mix has changed, and not really for the better, in my opinion. It's technically better. This mix going on now at this point, with the overall level kind of brought down a little bit, probably more suitable for like a radio broadcast, maybe you want to say a live recording. But the guitars are now even, or maybe even a little lower than the bass and drums, and that's not what I want, you know. Like I said, that overall record level is no longer pushing any limits or approaching clipping. It's just sort of your basic run-of-the-mill, which I guess up to this point you didn't realize that the mix had as much to do with it as it does. But that's part of what made the front part of this show just great, in my opinion. Heavy and great. I Still Love You, track number 2. Now, just have to talk about the Sioux City performance for a minute on this one. That was, I thought, and is, the best I've ever heard Paul sing, anything I've ever heard him sing. And it's challenging, you know. Even a decent version of this song, if you could sing it decently, you're still doing a great job, because it's a tough one to sing. So it's no knock on Paul that he can't quite top Sioux City here. Voice cracks a couple times, but he does really come pretty close, you know, to equaling it. The cracking voice that happens 2 or 3 times is really your only sort of main thing that makes it a little less than Sioux City. Overall, it's still great. Vinny's solo here is really good. It's almost like background volume level, though. That's the problem here. Next into the track 3, the bass solo, which of course goes into God of Thunder, Gene, his standard Gene bass solo, where he does the effects with the vocals. That's kind of cool when he does God of Thunder. So that's cool. You know, I think some of the older versions, Gene just sang straight up. So here you have those effects on the vocals versions of God of Thunder. Drum solo next. It's a solid, entertaining solo from Eric Carr. I don't know, 4 minutes or so, I'm going to guess. God of Thunder reprise is cool. So some solid stuff here. I don't know if this stuff's blowing me away like most of disc 1 that does, but it's still really good. I don't want to like disparage it too much. Love Gun next. Classic. Paul, airport security story intro. I don't know if he's ever done that without that intro. That aside, it's a great song and it's a really good version. Unfortunately, guys, I just can't ignore this normalized mix. It's somewhat neutered the show, you know, unfortunately. But just goes to show you how much a mix can affect listening experience, you know. But Love Gun, probably just as killer a performance as those first 7 or 8 songs on disc 1. It's just that the guitar's lower is not helping the overall version, you know. Vinny's solo. We're on yet another African safari hunt, all right? This one, I don't know, maybe it's a wildebeest this time. You got an elephant in the first disc. Something else is dying at the beginning of this one. And this one, it's overall a really good solo. But there is also, besides that, those crazy noises, a couple of noticeably bad notes, you know. But all that off-putting stuff still only amounts to 10 or 12 seconds of nonsense. And otherwise, it's a great solo, you know. So it's the haves and have-nots with Vinny's solos on this show. Didn't recall much of that on Sioux City. Really none of that, to be honest with you. Maybe Vinny's celebrating New Year's early. Who knows? It's also the 3rd show in the 3rd city in a row, 3 days in a row. So maybe all that stuff. And that goes into Paul's solo. Got its own track 8, Paul Stanley guitar solo. A few original, albeit brief, rhythms. I'm not sure if they became other songs or not. I'm not that much of a Kiss head to know if these rhythms Paul's jamming out in the beginning of his solo ended up being Kiss songs later on. But kind of interesting stuff. Rather than just hearing plucking notes, you're hearing all out rhythms, you know. So there's some dead air, I'm sure. Paul's gyrating for the female crowd because you hear a lot of what sound like only the women cheering him on. Of course, that solo leads into Black Diamond. This one is probably the closest song to those first 8 songs on disc 1 as far as a great sound. So closest thing to the opening barrage in terms of that heavy in-your-face sound. So it sounds like the sound gets a little boost. The guitars get a little boost here. Eric's vocal, I think, is better than he does on Sioux City. That was a little rough and ragged. Maybe not an all-time epic version of Black Diamond, but very, very good version of it again. Tank treads get turning at the back end of the song, which is very cool. As I mentioned, the effects are clearer and cleaner here than they are in Sioux City. Now, from the rest of the show, you got 2 more songs, and it's an audience tape patch done from the very end of Black Diamond, where the audience is cheering, into the first encore, Rock and Roll All Night, and then into Detroit Rock City. So both of those songs are audience source. Perfect example of why I only go after soundboards. Obvious drop off in quality overall. But I do appreciate the effort here by Zodiac. Get this show as full as you can onto CD. So I just realized, by the way, too, that the Sioux City show, which is a full soundboard, doesn't have Rock and Roll All Night on the CD. But it actually is listed on Setlist FM as being played. So I can't see it not being played, you know, but it's just a little odd. Usually if songs are missing on bootlegs, they're the first or last songs, not something that's next to last like that. So now, who knows, Setlist FM is not the be-all, end-all of setlist information, but that would be interesting to know if you guys know if Rock and Roll All Night was played at Sioux City. So, all right, as far as the packaging goes, we'll do a final word in a second. I'll show you. You already saw the front cover a bunch of times. My numbered sticker happens to be number 175. Depending on your seller, some of them stick them right to the case like this one came. Others, as you can see on my Sioux City, they just let it to you to do what you want with the sticker. So I just chucked it in the back there so I don't lose it. So you flip open your front cover, and we got some pictures of each guy in the band on the inside of the cover there. That's really cool. And let me straighten out the CD for you. Look at disc number 1. Identical pictures, I believe, on disc 1 and 2. So there's disc 1. Flip behind that. Disc number 2. Let me just double check there. Is it the same? Yep, same picture for disc 2. Rockford Soundboard, and back behind disc 2, back cover photo. What's cool about these, man, and cool about Zodiac, as opposed to your gray label, gray market bullshit, they take the time to do separate pictures and different pictures for each disc. Even though you had 5 different releases from the Creatures of the Night tour, all come out pretty much at the same time. They took the time to use different photos, as best I know. And I've seen pictures of the other ones. They look like slightly different pictures to me. I've already seen that back photo a bunch of times, but there it is again. And that is your Kiss Rockford 1982 soundboard review. So wrapping it up, you know, like I said in the beginning, every show's it's kind of its own animal. You guys already realize that. Now, back-to-back nights, how different can they be? Well, for one thing, Keep Me Coming was played at Sioux City, so that got dropped from the set. Doesn't look like anything replaced it, as best I can tell, though. This one, a very mix-related sort of review, in that disc 1 is as an aggressive sound as I've ever heard Kiss live, with that master level sort of pushing the limits of normal. It's not overblown. It's just kind of as high as possible without it being overblown. So the guitars are also higher in the mix than they would be for the end of disc 1 and most of disc 2. So there's at least a half dozen songs and solos where things get normalized. But that front 8 songs, and I'd say Black Diamond at the end too, that's heavy again. Just an amazing experience and one of the best shows I ever heard. Such a shame that that mix had to change. halfway through this package here, because man, it's just incredible. And I'd still say it's great. I'm not going to pick one over the other, because the Sioux City's got great sound, consistent through the whole, really, really good show. But man, disc 1 of Rockford is just mind-blowing how awesome it is, how heavy it is too. All right, so there you go. You got Sioux City on Rockford. Do you need them both? Of course you do. What kind of a question is that? You need me to answer that question? You need to just unsubscribe. All right, guys, I got some great stuff coming up. Really do. I found this nice deep purple collection. That's literally what it's called. It's a late 80s, maybe 1990 CD collection of their 70s albums. Stumbled across that on Facebook Marketplace. Man, I've been peeling back the layers of that for a while, for weeks now since I got it. That's coming up. We'll focus a little spotlight on that. And also the last dozen things I snagged at the record store and eBay. What an awesome dozen things. So I can't wait to show you that. All right, guys, everyone have a good rest of your day, and I'll catch you in the next video. What are we doing? It's a shore break, all right? I know, I've been taking too many breaks. I need to get to making some more content for you. Guys, everyone have a good rest of your day. Crank your kiss, all right? I highly recommend that too. Later.